Cuba is in a state of crisis ever since Donald Trump has called the tiny nation an extraordinary threat. The same thing he called Venezuela and the same reasoning he wants Greenland for. Now, Russia has stepped in for the first time, calling out America's quote-unquote suffocation tactics. But once you join the two dots, you realize that Trump and Putin want the same thing in Cuba. The question is, what is it? I'm Ananya Datta. Let's get started. Cuba is in the middle of a severe energy crisis as we speak. The government has imposed harsh emergency restrictions, from limiting who gets how much fuel to electricity cuts throughout the day. The island nation of 11 million people does not know what will happen next.
Today we don't have transportation, and we really feel upset and uncomfortable because we don't have transportation.
I see resistance beyond what the president, Miguel Diaz-Canel, says. He explains things, but really, when you live on the streets, you see that resistance is going to be much stronger than what he is asking for. So what we hope for is change. Change. We have to be smart and make the change. Because change is radical, we need change now.
The Caribbean region has been on edge ever since the US forces abducted Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro last month. For years, Venezuelan oil was not just the biggest supply line, it was Cuba's economic oxygen. Subsidized shipments powered electric grids, transport fleets, and boosted industries. It acted like a cushioning from the full force of US sanctions. That arrangement was always fragile, but more or less worked. Now that the American companies are in control of Venezuela's oil, all supplies have been cut. Trump has constantly said that Cuba is destined to fall.
I don't know, the word choke off is awfully tough. Cuba is a failing nation, and you have to feel badly for Cuba. They've treated people very badly. We have a lot of Cuban Americans who really were treated very badly, and they'd probably like to go back. And no, I'm not trying to, but it looks like it's something that's just not going to be able to survive. I think Cuba will not be able to survive.
You see, for over 6 decades, US policy towards Cuba has been built around an expectation of collapse. Different administrations have used different words, but the underlying assumption has remained consistent that pressure will eventually break Havana. While Cuba has rejected Trump's rhetoric, it has no choice but to keep the door of diplomacy open.
Cuba is willing to engage in dialogue with the United States, dialogue on any issue that parties wish to discuss. Under what conditions? Without pressure. One cannot engage in dialogue under pressure. Dialogue must take place without preconditions, on equal footing, and with respect for our sovereignty, our independence, and our self-determination.
So with this back and forth continuing for weeks now, Russia has made its debut in condemning the United States for what it calls the quote-unquote suffocation of Cuba.
The situation in Cuba is really critical. We are aware of this. We are in intensive contact with our Cuban friends through diplomatic and other channels. Indeed, the United States' attempts to suffocate Cuba are causing many difficulties for the country. We are discussing with our Cuban friends possible solutions to these problems, at least by providing all possible assistance.
The Kremlin is calling the Cubans its friends, a friendship that is not limited to just trade, rather runs deep into history. You see, long before NATO started to expand or Russia invaded Ukraine, the small Caribbean island forced Washington and Moscow to confront each other at point-blank range. In 1959, Cuba's then President Fidel Castro decided to nationalize Cuban sugar, oil, and infrastructure. At the time, American companies dominated the oil sector, and a nationalization purge would mean that the profits would be pocketed by the government and not these American giants. Washington under Dwight D. Eisenhower did not like this a bit. He responded with economic pressure and covert action, culminating in the Bay of Pigs invasion in the year 1961. Cuba had a sense of what America was planning. A similar tale had played out in 1953 Iran, just after Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh had decided to nationalize its country's oil. The CIA and MI6 overthrew his government and brought the Washington-friendly Shah to power. To avoid the same fate, Castro played smart. He knew his tiny country was in no position to counter the American invasion, so he invited the Soviets. At the time, the Soviets were powerful from the outside but were slowly crumbling from the inside. Cuba's invitation presented a great opening to prove strength abroad and at home. Also, the Cold War was globalizing. The US started to intervene in Asia, the Middle East, and Latin America. So Moscow brought the big guns to America's own backyard to prove its point. It placed nuclear missiles on Cuban soil, just 145 kilometers from Florida's coast. The Cuban Missile Crisis forced the US and the Soviet Union into their most direct confrontation ever, bringing the world closer to nuclear war than any other point in history. What often gets lost is that Cuba itself was sidelined during the resolution. The deal that ended the crisis was struck between Washington and Moscow. Cuba remained under embargo, under threat, and permanently defined as a security problem by the United States, the remnants of which we see in today's geopolitics.
We know that telephone conversations took place today between the president and General Secretary of the Communist Party of China, Xi Jinping, and the president of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin. In those conversations, they also express support, commitment, and a decision to continue collaboration and cooperation with Venezuela and with Cuba.
Venezuela's case is testament that Cuba shouldn't be under the illusion that Russia will come to its rescue if things go south, or more south than they already are. Venezuela's Maduro was titled Putin's most loyal ally in Latin America once. But when it came to returning the favor, the Russian president made zero statements about the allies' abduction, let alone providing military help. Russia's military partnership with Venezuela was vague, same is the case for Cuba. It is less of a standing alliance and more of a partnership of convenience, where Russia mostly decides the terms. Like, look at today's situation. Yes, the Kremlin has condemned the US for its actions against Cuba, which it says is creating difficulties for the common people. And this is the deeper subtext. Just as the US accuses Russia of weaponizing energy, food, and trade in Ukraine, Moscow responds by pointing to Cuba as a long-running example of economic strangulation used to achieve political ends. And this does two things for Putin: proof that the United States is a hypocrite and also keeps the New World Order intact. Russia does not need Cuba to win. It only needs Cuba not to fall. And when you come to think of it, Trump doesn't need Cuba to fall either. He just wants a deal that lets Washington control its backyard. That instinct is as old as American power itself, first codified in the Monroe Doctrine, or as Trump now brands it, the Monroe Doctrine. Cuba once again becomes the anomaly that exposes a deeper truth. In the end, the enemy and the friend are quietly aligned in their objective. Neither wants resolution, both want control. And in between them, Cuba is reduced to what it has always been in moments like this, just a pawn. I'm Ananya Datta. Thanks for watching.